What is going on, YouTube? It is Sharks here from Sharks Auto. I hope you are having a wonderful day and you have beautiful sunny weather wherever you are. I know I do not have beautiful sunny weather out here. If life's not going too good right now, I promise you things will get better as long as you want them to. Now, this is my second video ever, and this video, as I promised in my previous introduction video, will be about power to weight ratios. And I guess a lot of the content I'm talking about in this video is referenced in my article, Power to Weight Ratios and Why Are They Important, on my blog, www.sharksauto.com. So if you're curious about, digesting this information in a different way, maybe reading it or maybe understanding what I'm talking about a little bit more, seeing where things came from, feel free to go ahead and check that article out. I'll have my blog linked in the description as well. Without further ado, let's get into it. So if you've been into cars for, I guess, any amount of time, you've probably heard the word power to weight ratio thrown around. You may not fully understand what it is, and that's why we're here. So a power to weight ratio is the ratio of the amount of horsepower your car makes to the amount of pounds that it weighs, and it's usually measured in reverse units. So it's called a power to weight ratio, so you think it might be measured in horsepower per pound. It's actually measured, usually at least, in pound per horsepower. And the reason for this is usually, at least almost always, your car will weigh more. Like, say you have a 4,000 pound car, very often you're going to have less than 4,000 horsepower. Meaning, if you measured this thing in units of horsepower per pound, you're going to get a decimal. So if some people flip it to pound per horsepower, so you deal with whole numbers, since just the weight of your car is going to be a bigger number than the amount of horsepower your car makes. Now, of course, there are exceptions to this. There are dragsters out there that make, upwards of 4,000 horsepower and weigh, less than 2,000 pounds, sometimes less than 1,000 pounds, but those are the exceptions to the rule. So now that we have that rough definition out of the way, I guess the next thing that comes into your mind is probably, why should you care about this thing? And there are a few different ways to explain this, and I think one of the examples I used in my TikTok resonated with some people, and that is not so much a car example. It's about, the human body and weightlifting. So let's say I told you that I could bench press 225 pounds. Spoiler alert, I can't. But let's just say I could. Now, depending on who you are, you may be impressed or unimpressed. Let's say you're an individual who regularly benches 225. You're probably unimpressed, or you're an individual like myself who doesn't bench 225. You're also going to be impressed. Now, that's the wrong way to look at things, because the way you should quantify that is how successful is it for me, not how successful is it in your perspective. And the way to do that is you need perspective. That's the key word there. So let's say I weighed 135 pounds. Well, then, yeah, benching 225 is pretty damn good because that's, almost twice my body weight. Now, if I weighed 315, well, then benching 225 is not so great because, well, that's way less than my body weight. I should be at least doing my body weight. Same thing applies to cars to a certain extent. If I told you I had 700 horsepower in my car, depending on who you were, that may or may not be impressive. But what you should really care about is how much my car weighs. Let's say I had 700 horsepower in a Miata, which is about a 2,000 pound car. That is terrifying. That is a great power to weight ratio. There's tons of horsepower there, not a lot of weight. Let's say I had 700 horsepower in a 6,000 pound SUV. That's a different story. That is still a large amount of power, but that much weight is going to slow you down no matter what. So when people are talking about usually performance, one of the things that comes up in conversation is usually not just the horsepower, but the weight will also be mentioned at some other point in the conversation as well. They may not explicitly say they're talking about a power to weight ratio, but that's usually in the back of people's minds when it comes to performance. And the reason being is what I just explained. A really heavy car with a lot of power is not as impressive as a really light car with a lot of power. That's the gist of it. That's why this is important and why you should care about it. And now you might be wanting to have some type of perhaps a foothold or an understanding of what a good power to weight ratio is. Now, if you look at most online forums, people will claim that the power to weight ratio where a car starts to feel fast or sporty is 10 pounds per horsepower. I disagree with that. And we're going to talk about why I disagree with that later, but just keep that in mind kind of for the rest of the video, because for the rest of the video now, I'm going to talk about some different cars and their power to weight ratios. And I have all of these, in a table somewhere in my article. I can probably flash it on the screen at some point during the video. But to start off, we'll start with slower cars and move our way up to faster cars. And the first car on the list, classified as slow is the car I currently own, and that is a 2012 Honda Accord. Now, this is the Accord sedan, so the heaviest possible configuration you can get with the K24, so the smallest engine you can get in this sedan. There's a V6 model, I don't have that. There's a coupe, I don't have that. I have the worst combination you can think of, heavy and low power. So we're talking 4,000 pounds of weight and 200 horsepower, which gives it a power to weight ratio of 20. And you don't need to be a genius to realize this is not a fast car. I will be the first to say it is perhaps a dangerously slow car. There have been several instances on the highway where I want to accelerate, and I simply can't. There just isn't the top end power to do that. And I'm talking, maybe I shouldn't be driving that fast. Anyways, that's a different story. And now the next car that we're going to step up to is the Honda Civic Si, the car that I hope to buy this year. That is still, by no means is it fast. It's just faster than or quicker than the Accord, but it's still, widely regarded as a fairly slow car. It weighs about 3,000 pounds, so 1,000 pounds less than the Accord. It makes 200 horsepower, the same amount of power as the Accord. And that has a power to weight ratio of 14.7 pounds per horsepower. Now, keep in mind, online people say 10 pounds per horsepower is where a car starts to feel fast. In my opinion, you could argue that a Civic Si to most people would feel a little bit quick to the average human. But, I don't want to start that debate up, so we'll put a pin in that. The next car on my list is, still probably not fast, but quicker than the Civic Si, is the Subaru BRZ or the Toyota, I think GR86, whatever you want to call it. They're the same car. It weighs 2,800 pounds and makes 228 horsepower, so about 100 pounds lighter than the Si with a little bit more power. It has a power to weight ratio of 12.4 pounds per horsepower. Again, still not even classified as remotely quick or sporty by most online forums. Next on my list is a car that I consider to be very quick, though a lot of people get offended when you say it's fast. That is the Acura TLX Type S. I don't really care what anybody says. That is still a lot of power. That's still not a car that you can really push to its limits on the street. And that car weighs 4,200 pounds and makes 355 horsepower. And it has a power to weight ratio of 11.8 pounds per horsepower. Now, I might talk more about this later, but in the interest of time, I'm going to move on so I don't bore anybody to death. Next car on the list is the BMW M3 Competition. Now, I don't care what anybody says. This is a fast car, whether you like it or not. You could hate BMW, love BMW. An M3 Comp is a fast car. I'm not the biggest BMW fan, and I have to admit, it's a very fast car. So it weighs just under 4,000 pounds and makes just over 500 horsepower with a power to weight ratio of 7.8 pounds per horsepower. So again, if we follow that golden 10 pounds per horsepower number, they're saying that a car begins to feel fast or sporty somewhere between a TLX Type S and an M3 Comp, and that is a very, very large range. Now, to go even faster than an M3 Comp, you're getting into perhaps arguably supercar territory. The next car on my list is the Viper ACR. Now, this is a very fast car. It's, most people testify that it feels like it wants to kill you when you're driving, and I think it was the earlier gens were nicknamed the Widowmaker when they're on the Nürburgring. Almost no driver assist, manual V10, a monster of a car. Weighs 3,400 pounds, so very, very light, and makes 645 horsepower from a naturally aspirated V10. I think it's an 8.4 liter V10 if I'm not mistaken. And that makes 5.2 pounds per horsepower. So now this is a very, very good power to weight ratio. And, there's still two more cars left on this list that do even better than it. The next car on the list is a car that I classify as dangerously fast, which is the McLaren 720S. Now, this car weighs 3,100 pounds and makes 710 horsepower, giving it a power to weight ratio of 4.4 pounds per horsepower. And you're probably wondering what I have next on this list. If it's the Koenigsegg 1, maybe that could have made this list. That would have been cool. Actually, now that I say that out loud, the Koenigsegg 1 should have been on this list, but maybe that gives me the opportunity to give it its own separate article and its own separate YouTube video. But the final car on my list is a twin-turbo LS1 swapped Miata, which I have classified as terrifying. It weighs 2,300 pounds and makes 1,000 horsepower, giving it a power to weight ratio of 2.3 pounds per horsepower, and that is almost stupid. Like that is unusable and terrifying power if I had to say so myself. And I want to bring back that number I mentioned earlier, that supposed golden 10 pounds per horsepower of where a car begins to feel fast. After hearing this list, if you still agree with that, you and I are going to have to disagree because I'd say that is not when a car starts to feel fast. 10 pounds per horsepower is fast. That is a fast car. Something between a TLX Type S and an M3 competition, that is a fast car. I would argue that maybe 12-ish is when a car starts to feel fast around the BRZ and the TLX. That the TLX Type S, mind you, that could be a good spot, but definitely not 10. The TLX Type S is, from everything I know about it, is a car that's pushing the upper limits of what you can use on the street. And what I mean by that, when I say use on the street, yes, there will be instances, maybe once a month or twice a month where you can push a TLX Type S and, get floor it and give it the beans every now and then. But when I say use a car on the street, what I mean is kind of regularly floor the thing and shift it through a few gears and be able to do that quite often without having to worry about legal trouble. So let's say you had the TLX Type S. Maybe once a month you get an open stretch of road in front of you, no cops around, or on the highway, you get a clear path every now and then to let it eat. And you can do that. That's great. But you can only do that really once a month unless you want to risk, exponentially increase your risk of getting caught. And for the average person, I'd say they don't want to do that too often. Whereas something like the Subaru BRZ or the Civic Si, they have low enough powers or low enough horsepower that you can floor these cars regularly without putting yourself in any real danger with the law. Now, you'll probably still be speeding if you try to run either of those cars, foot pedal to the metal through first through fourth gear, but you will be going nowhere near as fast as you would in a TLX Type S or, an IS 500 or any of those cars. Those cars really push what they're doing. I've seen quite a few videos of the IS 500 and people complaining that, well, not necessarily complaining, but kind of concluding that it is too much power for a daily because you can put your foot down, and if you go through first through third gear, at the top of third, you're already at felony level speeds if you were to get caught. And that's not a car that you can really, drive 10 out of, give it everything it has as much as you can. It goes back to the old saying, I would rather drive a slow car fast than a fast car slow. And you have to decide what that means to you. Technically, I'm probably not even qualified to comment on that because I've been driving a slow car my whole life. But what I've quickly realized is it's fun to floor a slow car. Whether it's a fast or a slow car, it's fun to floor a car, period. Now, if you had a really fast car, you can't do that very often. If I had M3 comp money, would I be driving an M3 comp? Probably. But if I had M3 comp money, I would have more than one cars, and chances are the M3 comp wouldn't be the daily. I'm going to go ahead and conclude that the perfect power to weight ratio for that performance daily, or when a car can start to feel fast or sporty, is somewhere between 12.4 and 11.8. So that's between your BRZ and the TLX Type S. I kind of am biased and want to say the Civic Si should be included there just because I might own one very soon, but if we're being honest, the Civic Si is not fast. It's barely even quick. For me, it's going to feel fast because I'm coming from an Accord that weighs 1,000 pounds more and makes the same power. But I'm sure I will very quickly realize how slow that car actually is. But I'm still going to enjoy the hell out of it. I'm still going to floor it, and I'm going to have fun. Now, this video may seem a little bit convoluted again. It's only my second video. I'm filming this, right after creating my first video, so it should feel exactly the same as my first video if it's, just as convoluted or anything like that. But I'm going to stop it here because I realize I'm going on to 13 minutes now, and I think that's a little bit too long. I personally wouldn't want to watch a 13-minute video all the time. So, if you stuck around till here, thank you. Maybe leave a comment, let me know you stuck around till here, or send me an email if you don't want to comment. If you like the video, subscribe. That would be awesome. If you don't want to, I don't blame you. I probably don't do that when I'm going to stop talking. All right. Have a good day. I love you all. Keep smiling, keep breathing. If you wake up tomorrow, that means tomorrow's a good day. All right. Bye-bye.